Hi, I'm the amateur logician. I do hope you are doing well. In this video, we're going to think about the gambler's fallacy, and I'm going to be extensively referencing the great economist Ludwig von Mises because he has a lot of insights about the nature of this very fallacy. And I'm going to start with a quote from his treatise Human Action on page 110 of the Scholars Edition. Mises writes, direct quote, "A surgeon tells a patient who considers submitting himself to an operation that 30 out of every 100 undergoing such an operation die. If the patient asks whether this number of deaths is already full, he has misunderstood the sense of the doctor's statement. He has fallen prey to the error known as the gambler's fallacy," end quote. Now, probability theory and calculating probabilities can be quite difficult and counterintuitive, but the great thing about Mises' example is that this is pretty clear-cut. I think all of us can immediately spot that something is wrong with the patient's thinking. In other words, the patient is not thinking logically. Surely, if that number of deaths has already occurred, it doesn't follow that he's going to be okay in particular. That inference is totally fallacious. But interestingly, Mises links this up to the roulette wheel player, where the fallacy might not be so obvious. Mises writes, quote, "Like the roulette player, who concludes from a run of 10 in succession that the probability of the next turn of being black is now greater than it was before, he confuses case probability with class probability," end quote. Now, in a minute or two, we'll consider the distinction between class probability and case probability, but let's right now focus in on this example. We have this roulette wheel, the ball goes around, it lands on red, it goes around again, lands on red, and once again it goes around and lands on red. We might be tempted to think that the next time there's a greater chance it will land on black. After all, isn't this a fair roulette wheel where everything balances out, so to speak? But that's actually totally fallacious, and we're going to consider this in its formal structure, where I will show you precisely where the formal fallacy is located. But think of it this way. Each time the ball goes around, the probability, so to speak, resets. So the chance is not greater, it's the same. Each outcome of the roulette wheel is random if the previous outcome doesn't affect the future outcome. That's precisely how a fair roulette will behave. So a ball landing on red several times in a row doesn't increase the chance that it will next land on black. Now, what is this class probability and case probability? Well, class probability, Mises writes, means we know or assume to know with regard to the problem concerned everything about the behavior of a whole class of events or phenomena, but about the actual singular events or phenomena we know nothing but that they are elements of this class, end quote. So we know the whole class. Whereas with case probability, we're dealing with individual events or people where there's no class reference, no objective frequency to reference. And this very much parallels another economist. There's the Chicago School economist, Frank Knight, who talked about risk, which we can link with class probability, and uncertainty with case probability. This is actually important for a couple of reasons. It links up to the first example, which is related to insurance, because risk you could insure against. Uncertainty you can, strictly speaking. And that's where, from the point of view of Frank Knight or Ludwig von Mises, you get profits and loss. You can't insure profit and loss. But risk you can, strictly speaking, insure. So consider the first example about that patient. The patient, in fact, is erroneously thinking that there's a dependent causal link between the long-run statistical distribution and his individual chances. He thinks past outcomes affect future outcomes, including his own. Now, an insurance company has data about a whole class of people that submit to the operation. We got those numbers. But nothing else is known about the individual persons except that they are members of that class. That's exactly what Mises would call class probability. So for Mises, when it comes to class probability, the class of a whole is sufficiently known, but the only thing known about the individual events is that they are part of the class. We know nothing more about those individual cases except that they are members of that class. There's no extra unique insight, so to speak, about an individual case. And that's exactly why Mises could say that the gambler's fallacy with that roulette player, he's confusing case probability with class probability. He doesn't know the case probability. He only knows the class probability. So if we consider a roulette outcome like this, where it lands on black quite a bit, what's likely to happen next? Another black or a red? Well, both cases are equally likely. So let's think about this more formally. The first question I think we have to ask is, what is a fair roulette? It's going to be unbiased and independent. It's going to be random. But what is randomness? Something is random if there's no systematic pattern. This implies that there is no regularity. At least we can't see any regularity. No gambler can develop a gambling system to beat the house. There also must be a certain complexity such that we cannot develop that gambling system. We cannot find any regularity. So that, roughly speaking, is how we can think about the randomness. So that roulette wheel is fair, it's random. We can say that each outcome has an equal chance of occurring in the long run, black or red. It's random. It's unbiased, therefore, so it's unbiased. But moreover, each outcome is independent of the previous outcome. So we have independence as another key feature. One reason it is random is because one trial is independent from the next. Again, if it were not, and the previous trial influenced the next, then a gambler could develop some kind of gambling system. So we have unbiased and independent. There are four possibilities here. We're thinking about unbiased versus biased, independent versus dependent. So this is one situation where we have something that's unbiased and independent, but we can also have an unfair roulette. So it can happen in three ways. One, it's biased and not independent. Two, it's biased and independent. And three, it's unbiased and not independent. Or in other words, it's only going to be fair when it's unbiased and independent. Great. Now we can nail down this formal fallacy. Where is the fallacy? We have an inconsistency in the premises. Premise 1, this roulette is fair. Premise 2, this roulette landed on red a lot. Conclusion, thus it lands, or it will land, on black soon. It will land. Let me get rid of that S. It will land on black soon. Well, this is formally, not just informally, but formally invalid, because premise 1 assumes independence, right? And that means we can't infer that conclusion. We can't infer proposition 3. That's exactly why this argument is no good. It's assuming independence, but if we assume that, we can't say that it's going to land in black soon, because a fair roulette, by definition, is unbiased and independent. So here is the gambler's fallacy. I think it's a pretty interesting fallacy to think about and consider. Now, I am the Amateur Logician from amateurlogician.com. If you like this type of content, I would really appreciate it if you gave this video a like. Thank you so much for your viewership. You can visit my website. You can sign up to my newsletter. I also have an account at Instagram and on X. Again, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And I hope to see you again soon. Good luck to you and be well.